So welcome back to Sprague River Homestead. We've all heard the terms off-grid, sustainability, homesteading, or even modern homesteading. Today we want to talk about the definitions of those, the technical definition of those, and how we incorporate them into living the lifestyle. So really the term off-grid is technically defined as not connected to a municipal power system or a source. Usually that's power lines coming in, whether it's overhead or underground. You're going to be connected to the power grid physically.
So for most of us modern homesteaders, what we actually think of in terms of off-grid is no actual municipalities coming into your property. That means that you are self-contained on septic, water, and power. Now, if you have, like for us, we use mobile internet. We use a Verizon hotspot. We use that for our cell phones as well. For most modern homesteaders, that's still considered off-grid. There are some folks who don't agree with that. If you've got satellite internet, that's also still off-grid. Basically, your power, water, and septic being self-contained is what the modern definition of off-grid living is.
So as far as sustainable, the technical definition of being sustainable is to never deplete a resource. So for us as homesteaders, whether that's we're going to grow our own food, whether that's we're going to use our own power or anything else, we're never going to deplete that out. We're going to continually be able to replace it, whether we're going to grow it or develop it or draw it in for power like from the sun. So in order to be self-sufficient or to tend towards self-sufficiency, the key there is to be able to replace your resources. A lot of times that's going to be with power and water, so you have your own well, or you're able to generate your own power with solar, wind, water, etc. On the piece for food, you're typically going to be able to grow your own meats, which may be chicken, rabbit, cow, duck, whatever it's going to be, and your own vegetables. You're probably going to have a garden where you're going to have greenhouses that you can grow starts in, grow all the way to harvesting, and then probably put that food away for the winter months when you can't generally grow a lot of the stuff.
And there are varying levels of self-sufficiency. For some people, you may be growing your own food, but that doesn't mean that you're necessarily saving your own seeds. You could be, baking your own bread, but not necessarily growing your own wheat and making flour. Same thing, a lot of people do a beef cow or a beef steer every year, every other year. That doesn't necessarily mean that you're growing you've got the cow and actually giving birth to the steer. So there's varying levels. Most of us in modern homesteading, we do our very best to do as much of our own self-sufficiency as possible. And I think most of us are working towards as much as we can. That doesn't diminish, being a modern homesteader or being self-sufficient if you like to use Tide or Gain in your laundry.
And speaking of homesteading, the real definition of where homesteading came from was the Homestead Act, back in 1862, when the U.S. government was able to give sections of land, typically about 160 acres, to an individual or family that was willing to stay on that property and develop it for 5 years. Now, about 40 years ago, I think it was in the 1960s, the Homestead Act was abolished. They were no longer going to give free land to anybody else. We all had to go out and buy it. So some of us that are homesteaders are basically paying a mortgage to either family, friends, or a bank. Or some of us have inherited a homestead, which the definition of a homestead is technically an ancestral piece of property, or it's the land and home where a family lives. So if you think from there, when nobody gets free land anymore for developing it and we're all buying it, if you're watching this, you are a homesteader. I don't care what level you're on, you are a homesteader. You're a modern homesteader because we're living in modern times. Very few people are going to truly live off-grid where they have no connection, whether that's power, water, septic, or internet. We've had that before where somebody said, you're on the internet, you're not homesteading, and nor are you off-grid. I guess you have to be homeless and living under an overpass to be an off-gridder at this point.
A lot of guys, even up in Alaska, where when I think of true, tried and true homesteading, a lot of Alaskans up there that are living out in the bush, even they, because of the climate that they live in, tend to have ham radio, CBs, some way to call for help in an emergency situation. So if your definition of being off grid and being a homesteader means that you can't have any outside connection, well, then I guess there's really not very many of us left in the entire world. You can even look into Africa and these little villages that no power, no water, no septic, but they still have satellite phones. So
So hopefully with that, we've given you at least the technical definitions of some of these terms you see a lot of. And a lot of times people don't know the technical definition, and they're only going off what they've read or what they've heard or what they've seen.
remember that the modern homesteader, it's different for everybody. The definition varies wildly by person, but one thing remains the same. The bottom line is that all of us in the modern homesteading movement are just trying to live a more natural, self-reliant, self-sufficient lifestyle and kind of get back to nature, I think.
Yeah. So that's it from Sprague Homestead. Hopefully today we taught you a little bit of history on homesteading and given you some better knowledge on what these terms are defined as that you see used a lot. We'll see you next time.